Imagine for a moment you're a targeting officer. You're looking at real-time satellite imagery of Crimea. For years, this peninsula was known, globally as an impregnable fortress, a symbol of insurmountable security. Now, your task is to pinpoint one target, the command post of an S-400 Triumph Air Defense Battalion. You know that system is the backbone of their entire air shield, and you know that if you hit its radar, the whole shield just goes dark.
And that intense focus on precision is exactly what we're looking at in today's deep dive. We're analyzing this highly sophisticated military campaign called Operation Blinding the Giant. Our sources, and these range from Western intelligence reports to ground analysis from groups like KRM Reality, they detail how this is. Well, it's much more than just battlefield activity. It's a calculated effort. It's a radical shield strategy. It's creating a massive logistical crisis, and this is critical. It shows how these military facts are being used as currency at the highest levels of European diplomacy, the so-called silent front in Brussels.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission today is to cut through the noise. We'll start on the peninsula looking at this tactic they're calling onion peeling and how it's collapsing these long-held defense myths. Then we'll shift to the ground and really quantify the cost, this logistics nightmare you mentioned. And finally, we'll connect that tactical success directly to Europe's very uncompromising diplomatic stance. We have to start with the pace of the conflict itself. The sources are really clear on this. We're seeing a profound, a measurable change. These strikes, they aren't random anymore. They're not just opportunistic attacks. They're happening daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And the precision is increasing exponentially. It just points to a whole new strategic phase.
Exactly. And analysts are calling this the onion peeling strategy.
Onion peeling. Okay, so like layers.
Right. Think of a defense system built in layers. Instead of, trying a direct assault on the heavily armored core, the cities, the big troop bases.
You peel back the outer layers first.
You surgically dismantle the invisible assets. We're talking about the electronic eyes, the communication relays, the entire nervous system that makes those defenses work in the first place.
And when you look at the list of successful targets in the source material, the level of detail is just startling. It really speaks to high-quality intelligence. They aren't just hitting missile batteries. They're hitting the specific parts that make it a functional shield.
That's the key distinction, yeah. We see evidence of strikes on the command post of an S-400 Triumph Battalion. That's the nerve center. But more importantly, they're consistently wiping out the specific radar systems. For example, the sources detail the obliteration of the 92 N6E multifunction radar.
Okay, let's pause right there. For our listener, when we say S-400 system, what exactly is the 92 N6E radar? Why is that one component so critical?
That's a great question. Think of the S-400 battery as a hand. The missile launchers, those are the fingers, the part that delivers the weapon. The 92 N6E radar is the brain and the eye. It's the sophisticated radar that acquires the target, locks on, and then guides the missile to it. If you lose the 92 N6E, the entire multi-million-dollar S-400 system is effectively deaf, dumb, and blind.
So the missile launchers themselves could be perfectly fine, physically intact, but they're
just massive, expensive hunks of metal. They can't execute their function.
Right.
And that's the core of this blind giant metaphor. The strategic point is that they aren't just removing one gun from the field, they're neutralizing an entire air defense umbrella just by blinding it. And this targeting goes beyond just the S-400 parts. The damage map shows the A-10 radar station south of Simferopol Airport was wiped out. Plus, crucial state-of-the-art surveillance systems, the Nebo SV and the Unibo, were destroyed between Yutnoy and Yevpatoria.
Okay, so if the 92 N6E is the eye for the S-400, what were the Nebo SV and Unibo doing? What was their job in the network?
Those are your long-range early warning systems. They're the ones scanning the horizon for hundreds of kilometers. They tell the shorter-range, high-precision radars like the 92 N6E where to look. So by taking them
They're shrinking their reaction time.
From minutes down to seconds. You don't just blind the giant, you force it to fight in a phone booth.
But here's a question that comes up from the material. If they have sophisticated command and control, couldn't the remaining missile launchers get targeting data remotely, from a drone or a friendly jet or a satellite? Doesn't the blind giant still have backup eyes somewhere?
That's a valid point, but the sources indicate these strikes are timed very carefully. They happen at the same time as, or right before, coordinated electronic warfare. So while data could theoretically be supplied remotely,
it's not that simple.
Not at all. Linking a complex air defense system to external sensors is hard, it's slow, and it needs communication links that are themselves vulnerable. The material suggests the speed of the incoming weapons just leaves no time for that clumsy process of setting up remote fire control. They're exploiting the lag time, the latency in the system.
It really sounds like Crimea is being used as a real-world laboratory for these advanced tactics.
It is. We have a quote from an anonymous intelligence officer who notes that Crimea is becoming a proving ground. Quote, "If our weapons can pierce the Crimean air defense net, then across the vast Russian mainland, nowhere will remain safe." This speaks directly to the collapse of that myth of impenetrable defense. If the shield fails therein, arguably their most fortified region, the strategic message is just devastating.
And that successful blinding operation in the sky leads directly to the next phase, pressure on the ground. We're moving from neutralizing the eyes to severing the arteries, hitting energy and logistics right after the air defense is gone.
This is textbook exhaustion warfare. I mean, the cold calculation is that modern heavy equipment tanks, artillery, it all runs on enormous amounts of fuel and power. Like the sources say, a T-90 tank is just a useless pile of scrap metal without fuel. And a sophisticated anti-aircraft system is just an obstacle if it doesn't have the electricity for its cooling, its radar, its command center.
So the most immediate result of this onion peeling is the logistics nightmare.
Yeah.
How does hitting forward fuel depots, which might sound minor to somehow, does that become a full-blown crisis for the whole operation?
It creates a crippling slowdown and an exponential increase in risk. See, forward depots are for rapid resupply, fueling units in hours. By constantly destroying these, the Army is forced to rely on reserve bases, which are hundreds of kilometers deep inland. They have to use these long, single-route roads.
So instead of a quick local top-up, they're mobilizing these heavy, vulnerable fuel convoys that have to travel huge distances.
Exactly. Fleets of trucks driving, say, 500 or 600 kilometers round trip. And they're doing this under a sky that is no longer shielded by that S-400 net. Suddenly, those fuel convoys become incredibly slow, very vulnerable, and as the experts confirm, incredibly lucrative targets. The supply time for a critical unit stretches from a few hours to maybe an entire day or more.
And in a fast-moving combat situation, a 24-hour delay for fuel isn't an inconvenience. It can be fatal for the troops waiting for it.
It is fatal, and it forces a huge operational shift. You go from being proactive and mobile to being reactive, just hoarding resources. But the arteries being severed, it's not just fuel, it's electricity. The source material highlights these precision strikes on electrical sites.
Give us an example, a specific power target, and why losing it is militarily crippling, not just an inconvenience for civilians.
Okay. Take the Krasnoperkopsk 220 kV substation. That's described as an arterial power line. Its destruction does more than just affect local homes. It cuts power to major military repair workshops, to armament factories. Similarly, the damage to the main turbine at the Saki thermal power plant, one of the largest on the peninsula, that paralyzes automatic loading systems for artillery units and, crucially, cuts communications for rear logistics headquarters.
So this isn't about causing widespread blackouts for the sake of it?
No, not at all.
It's about disrupting the opponent's ability to maintain and deploy its own war machine.
Absolutely. The whole effect is to force this colossal war machine to operate in a state of starvation. They're being exhausted logistically, electronically, before they can even make a decisive move. Crimea, which was supposed to be a secure base, is turning into a massive liability, a logistical black hole.
That comprehensive pressure blinding the sky, severing the arteries on the ground, it's yielding results, but not just on the battlefield. This success is creating leverage thousands of kilometers away in Brussels, which brings us to the silent front.
Right. It's important to understand the global diplomatic backdrop here. Washington, for instance, has been fluting ideas about negotiation, putting forward peace drafts to de-escalate, which always carry the risk of some kind of territorial compromise.
But the European response, particularly from the EU, has been to build a kind of diplomatic firewall. They've tightened their official stance. They're sending a really uncompromising message.
This is a critical point. The position, and you hear it articulated forcefully by figures like European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, is unequivocal. There will be no compromise that forces Ukraine to trade its land for peace. Any proposal that limits their military freedom or requires ceding territory is it's unacceptable.
So why is Europe, which can often be divided on defense, being so firm on this one point right now? The sources suggest it's a foundational security issue for them, a red line.
It goes back to the core principles of international law that modern Europe is built on. The analysis is pretty simple. If the international community legitimizes redrawing borders with tanks today, they aren't settling this conflict. They're basically inviting future conflicts all across the continent. That's why Europe now sees Ukraine's security as completely linked to the security of Paris, of Berlin, of Warsaw. It's a fundamental defense of the entire post-1945 order.
So the diplomatic position hardens because they see any compromise on land as a threat to their own stability. And this is where the battlefield success in Crimea really comes into play.
Precisely. The military success we've been talking about, this demonstration of real capability to pierce sophisticated defenses, to create a logistics crisis, that is the currency Western diplomats are using. They can argue with confidence that a nation capable of pulling off operations like blinding the giant is a nation that deserves the absolute right to decide its own future, its own territorial integrity. It shouldn't have peace dictated to it by military pressure.
It's the difference between negotiating from a position of weakness versus a position of strength.
Absolutely. The success of the onion peeling strategy has fundamentally strengthened the diplomatic hand of Kyiv and its most committed European allies. It's a signal to the world that this isn't over. The military dynamic is still fluid and it is shifting.
So bringing this all together, what does this whole panoramic picture mean for you, our listener? We have the collapse of defense myths in Crimea on one hand, and this decisive, unyielding agenda setting in Brussels on the other. You can really see the world's destiny being shaped in real time.
The core lesson from the battlefield is the collapse of the myth of sheer military mass. The power dynamics have changed. The lesson from Crimea is clear. Victory doesn't just belong to the one with the biggest battalions. It belongs to the one who knows how to precisely exploit an opponent's blind spots.
And we have the examples right here. A huge S-400 system becomes a useless artifact if you take out its radar eyes. A vast army gets bogged down, exhausted, and starved if its fuel convoys can't reach their units.
The source material is compelling. It says the traditional calculus of warfare is obsolete. It's a war of systems versus systems, intelligence versus mass.
Which leads us to the biggest question, one that goes way beyond the current conflict. What world order will be established when the smoke finally clears?
That is the essential issue being decided right now, both in Crimea and in Western capitals. Will it be a world where international law sovereignty, territorial integrity is actually respected? Or will it be a world where the powerful can just redraw the map whenever they want, creating perpetual instability?
And the assertion from the sources is clear. The old world order, the one guaranteed only by promises and old treaties, is gone. The new era needs security guaranteed by real deterrence capabilities and enduring alliances.
It requires a strategic and technological cohesion that Europe has, well, historically struggled to achieve. But now it's basically being mandated by geopolitical reality.
We've covered the onion peeling strategy, the logistics of the blind giant, and the strengthening diplomatic firewall of the silent front.
And that leads directly to our final thought for you to consider. Given that successful operations like blinding the giant rely so heavily on advanced tech, on detailed intelligence, and complex logistical analysis, what specific level of integrated command technological, military, and diplomatic must the EU achieve internally to ensure this new alliance-based security model can actually hold up against future high-tech global threats? It's a question of transforming a defense alliance into a truly unified strategic entity.